What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 38, part 2 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. We're going to continue our conversation with Kathy and Javier Bustos. We're going to get into what that peer couple, that peer support couple is, and we're going to learn a little bit more about them and what they do to help each other and help other people. So let's get right into it.
The whole time we're telling each other, we're fine, what can we do for other people?
Right.
And I think that's how public servants get caught up in this whole mindset of, we're here to help everybody else and not ourselves. And so we were in personal crisis at the time of that video. And, but that video is a window into our kind of hammer on the head that we neaded help.
Right.
And so that video began our journey towards getting the help that we needed.
So, yeah, and I think about the video and I think about that interview that you guys did, and that's how I have a copy of this in my hand, is because you asked a question of the group when we were there, and you said, does anybody remember what it is that I said that really made a point? And you said that you were being more of a police officer than a wife. And so that, why that stuck with me when you said it, I don't know. Maybe because it was destiny that I have this video in my hands. I don't know. But but what you said, that made a difference, because I think about that a lot. Is we wear a lot of hats as police officers, as people, and anybody that's out there. You wear a lot of hats, whether you're a parent, a plumber, or a teacher, and you coach soccer after school, or whatever the case is. We wear a lot of things, and we sometimes forget that we have to take that hat off and change that, because of, it's almost like when you guys do a lot of public speaking, so you have to play to your audience sometimes. Sometimes, especially if you're talking to police officers, there's some grumpy gusses out there who just, I will get through this, and I got stuff to do. And that's fine. Or you got A-type personalities and stuff. And then you have to change that hat. And okay, I've got to adjust this to how this person's going to be able to take, because it's a needed thing. But we want to make sure, and I don't want to shove it down your throat, but I want you to want to take it. I want you to want to take this information. And I think we forget to change our hat sometimes.
Well, even when Javier was describing the aftermath of his shooting, what did he say? That I peered him.
Right.
I was a peer to him. I was not a spouse to him. I was a peer to him.
Yeah. And it's funny because, she's right. I do say that she was peering me. And that shows you, that's a marker of what our relationship was. We weren't a married couple living together.
Who happened to be cops.
Yeah, we were two cops that were living as roommates in the same house.
Right.
And, it's funny because, like as you said, we probably go all over the country and we do public speaking, and we talk about what we went through and how we survived it and where we are in our lives now. And people come up to us and say, I wish I would have known you 10 years ago, because y'all would have been able to help me. And we say, you don't want to know Javier and Kathy from 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, because we were so different. We were living in so much crisis. We thought that was normal. And that's what happens to everybody who does the job, whether it's in law enforcement or other first responders, brothers and sisters, is we live in so much trauma. We accept that as our normal. And when finally something happens, and it isn't always a big critical incident, it could be any kind of critical incident, and it just rips the Band-Aid off. Everything comes flowing out, and you're thinking, where did all this come from?
Yeah.
It was always there, but now it's finally getting released. And then if you're able to work and get through it, and you reach a different level of your life and how you're living it, then you realize, oh my goodness, I can't believe we lived in so much trauma and accepted it as that's how it should be.
And that video is our constant reminder of that. The officer involved is our constant reminder.
And that's good. Some people might, and I would assume you guys feel the same way, that it's good. Yes, you saw yourself and you're unhealthy, but you see yourself and you're like, okay, we know where we're at. We have a window to who we were, and we don't ever have to, and we know where not to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I noticed, and this is something that you brought up, Kathy, in the video. You were like, did you notice that I was heavier? I was, and you start going down this line of different things. You're critiquing yourself, and that's I think we look at that like, hey, I'm here to help somebody, but that would be like the person who has a box of donuts and they're trying to be a personal trainer for somebody. They're holding a box of donuts, talking to somebody, and they're like, okay, you got to lift that and you got to eat better too. And they're just shoving donuts in their head.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We were not living, it was nothing for us to eat. We both worked nights. It was nothing for us to eat Whataburger at 3:00 in the morning and then try to go to sleep. And so everything about our life was out of balance.
Yeah.
It was just getting through the next day. And so all of it kind of came to fruition with that video.
Right.
And so that was the straw that broke the camel's back was Javier's shooting, because we had been through so many crises before. And that's just professional crises. We also had a son who was enduring multiple deployments to Iraq. And so we had that as a military family, and a daughter, our empty nester, she went off to college. So we were having all the personal experiences going on too. But yeah, that was the catalyst. You can tell in that video that neither one of us are healthy. And that's our gauge of where we never want to be again. And I know that there are a lot of, and this is not judgmental because we were there. We still struggle.
Of course. Yeah.
But that's our gauge of where we never want to go back to. And we hope to drag people into the light with us.
Right. I'm always one that I try to look at the good in a bad situation or make the positive out of the negative. We know now if we start slipping into a bad way of living or a bad mood of living, we're able to catch ourselves a lot quicker now than what it used to be. Because I'm going to use the word escape, but when you escape the trauma and you start living your life in a better way, when things happen in life and you start falling backwards, you're at least, you feel it and you can catch yourself. And you can say, no, I'm not going to do that again. And you got to work harder to get back again. Everybody thinks that once you escape the trauma, once you start living a better life, that you're good to go. And that is the most wrong way of thinking.
Yeah. What
you're doing is you're setting yourself up to live your life, to catch yourself so you don't fall backwards.
Yeah, and for me, I'll speak for me. I'll let Javier speak for himself. But for me, I had been suffering from chronic pain for years, migraine headaches, stomach issues, all the things that police officers face as a result of chronic stress. Right. And that was normal to me. That was normally the way I felt. So if I felt good, that was the state I was in, I was unwell, and being unwell was my normal state. And so now I said, we still struggle because we do, we love hamburgers and French fries and
who doesn't
love Buc-ee's barbecue sandwiches. And, but we know if we eat those things or if we do those things, we're going to pay the price for it. And when you feel better, you know what it feels like to feel bad. Right. And so we're able to catch ourselves much quicker than we used to.
Yeah. It's interesting because if I just go on a bender and I eat a lot of bad food, and then all of a sudden I'm not feeling well physically and emotionally, more so on the emotional part. And I told Kathy, I said, I'm just not feeling good. I am really in a lot of mental stress right now. Kathy goes, well, look what you've been eating, you idiot.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, yeah, you're right.
To each other.
Yeah.
We do that for each
Sure.
other.
Yeah, it's like you're right. You know, I have been shoving down bad food into my system, and I have to make the adjustments. I'm never going to be a svelte, muscle bound guy.
Right.
There's just, I'm not going to be that 175 pound stripped, lean cut person. I'm going to be who I am, but I'm not going to say, well, that's an excuse just to just go crazy. I'm going to eat well, and I'm going to exercise, and that is going to help me feel better physically and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think because of our culture, they ingrained, they're getting better, but they ingrained in the police academy all these sacrifices that you have to make as a police officer. You're going to be divorced. You're going to be you're going to abuse substance. You're going to be overweight. You're going to be depressed. You're going to have anxiety. And so when those things start happening to you along your career, you're like, oh, they said this would happen. It's part of the sacrifice of serving my community.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you don't recognize the toll that it takes on you. And there are, thousands of walking wounded out there that just don't know how to take that next step because our profession did not prepare them to take that next step.
Right. All the training is like, this bad stuff is going to happen. And so when it happens, as I say it, you validate the negative. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, they said this is how it's going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I told a story a couple podcasts ago there was this, I used to coach soccer for my kids years ago. And there was one of the moms, she was always talking about how there's always drama at the soccer games. All the parents are all drama. And I sat back and I thought about it and I said, I don't know if that's true, but as I'm going through it, I noticed that, when she would come to a thing, she would, a game or a practice or whatever, she would come and the kids would be in tow and the husband, he's carrying all the chairs and all the stuff and he'd be in tow and all this different stuff. And she's walking in there like, goddess soccer mom. And then everybody would be fine beforehand. Everybody's get along. Everybody's, shaking hands or doing whatever and, laughing and joking. And then as soon as she got there, that's when the stuff would happen. Her mindset was, there's always drama. So if there's not drama, we got to make it happen. And that person you started noticing that the reason there's so much drama with all the parents is because she's around. And and that was just that. And I started realizing she's the problem. And so that's how I also looked at things that, like you're saying, once you start saying, oh, that's there. Well, everybody else is looking at it. I don't see it. Well, yeah, it is. Look, here it is. Well, you just put that there. No, I didn't. And there's a weird side to that.
Well, pay a look at any police department. There's always the negative person in the department who's complaining about the negativity in the department.
Right.
And if you don't know who that person is, it might be you.
Right. Or they're always complaining about the morale so low. The morale is just terrible.
Yeah.
Well, we were all joking and having a good time and, positive and thinking about being here. And then you walked in and all of a sudden morale is on the, I see that you looked at her as like, you know who I'm talking about. So.
Oh no, it was me.
Oh yeah.
He's laughing because it was me in my department. Yeah. I was the angry guy. People always, when we tell our story, they look at Javier as, when I talk about the angry person and this and that, they always think it's Javier, but it's not. It was me.
Tell me about that. Tell us about that.
Because I had never dealt with any of my experiences in my law enforcement career, I just built up a wall. I was very cynical, very angry. And of course, at the time, did not understand that that's a common response to traumatic events is all that. And so I just walked around in anger for several years because I couldn't rationalize my mind around everything that happened to us. I was angry at my organization because Leonard shouldn't have been on the motorcycle. I was angry at how they handled the attempted suicide of my corporal. And so I had a lot of valid reasons to be angry, but I never got over it. I just went from one angry thing to the next. And I reflect a lot back on it now because I had young officers who were watching me,
right.
And they were growing up underneath me. And I've even met with some of them now to apologize and tell them, I was living in trauma for years and didn't know it. And that's how I chose to survive, is just be angry.
And how did you get out of that? How did you finally, I mean, obviously the video, you start seeing yourself, but.
Right. Absolutely. I start seeing myself in the video. We're struggling. Unfortunately, my children were never affected by it because, they were grown. And I say that, of course, they probably have a different story to tell. But
right.
I just got tired of being angry all the time. And that's when we started looking for resources to get help. I had never had any counseling. I had never had any peer support or many debriefings for any of the traumas that I had ever been through. Because growing up in the law enforcement profession, especially as a girl, the mentality was you don't talk about it, you don't think about it, you do your job. Don't be a girl. If you're emotional, they're going to call you names. And so that's how I was raised in law enforcement. So, I just wrote an article about it. What's so funny about anger, because in our profession, there's two acceptable emotions. There's humor or anger.
Uh-huh.
Mine was anger because I'm not that funny of a person.
Right.
But yeah, I stayed angry. I was angry as to why the corporal that attempted suicide lived and the officer who wanted to live died. I couldn't rationalize myself around that. And just everything just built the anger iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
It was all there. And so we started getting counseling. We went to a post-critical incident seminar. I had EMDR, which was life-changing.
What is it, EMDR?
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it's a therapeutic modality for trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we like to emphasize culturally competent counselors for police officers and first responders, because typically they know how to do EMDR. And it's a therapy that's used that kind of, your brain processes trauma in certain ways. And sometimes when you've gone through post-traumatic or acute stress, it gets stuck and you have nightmares and flashbacks and you're constantly being hit in the head by this trauma. And EMDR just breaks it up. It doesn't take away the memory of the event, but it takes away the emotion of the event. And so that was very helpful for me. And then just continuing to work the steps, continuing to exercise and meditate and eat well. And that's always a struggle because, we can always tell ourselves, I don't have time, I don't have this, I don't have that, but I have to continue working every day to stay healthy.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there's that point when you get through the stresses or the struggles or the whatevers at that trauma that you're also, I don't want to do it. I don't want, and you're now wallowing in your own pity or your own whatever. And I'm just not going to do it today. And then today turns into tomorrow. And then tomorrow turns into the next day. And I think we forget that a lot of times because it works the same way the other way around. You don't want to work out, just go do it. If you just go do it, it's going to get done. And then hey, you know what? You realize that you feel better. And then tomorrow, what do? Just go do it.
Yeah.
And I think we lose that connection because we're so when we get into these things, we get those blinders like a horse, and we forget about it.
And people forget to realize how much mental health has to do with your physical health and physical health has to do with your mental health. And they're intimately joined. And if you don't have good in one, you're not going to have good in the other.
Right.
So we're like the last people. If somebody would have told me 10 years ago that I was going to be on a podcast talking about exercise and nutrition, I would have said you're nuts. But it is so important, and I know that, and I learned it the hard way.
Right, and I think we also dog ourselves because we're like, well, I'm not a certified whatever professional or whatever the case is, or I don't necessarily do that. But that doesn't mean we don't know it. And sometimes we have to go through those hard times to be able to know, okay, this works or that does not work and how we deal with it. And I think we forget who we are when we do that stuff, that we're people, and the people that we're talking to, just as I said, they're people and they're having struggles and they're having hard times and rough times, or they're feeling great about themselves, and it's a shell game that they might say they're feeling great, but inside they are not, and they know they're not.
Yeah.
So if as a peer couple now, you guys are known as, I've got your business card right here and it says that peer support couple. Who is that? How did that come about? Obviously this whole thing, but how did you guys say, you know what, we're going to be known as that? We're going to put a stamp on it.
Basically what happened was we were both peers at a post-critical incident seminar in Huntsville, Texas. And we were at a seminar, and some of our other peers were looking for us. And when they saw us, one turned and said, "Oh, there's that peer support couple." And it stuck in my head. And so then time goes forward, and we're invited to do a public speaking engagement. We were asked, actually, I was asked, what do we call y'all? How do we advertise y'all? And I said, just call us that peer support couple. And I told Kathy about it after the fact, and she's like, "Are you nuts? What do you mean that peer support couple?" I said, "No, it's catchy. It's catchy. Yeah. They're going to know that we're a couple and that we do peer support." And so that's what went with, and it just stuck to where now, of course, we have our business cards and other paraphernalia. And a friend of ours, a great friend of ours, Betsy Brantner Smith, she said, whoever thought of that peer support couple is a genius.
I'm like, don't feed his ego.
Yeah.
But it's catchy, and of course, people know that we're a couple and we do peer support. They know that we're not going to stand up in front of them and do a magic act.
Yeah.
They know who we are, and they know what we're going to be talking about.
And so what is it that you guys do go talk to folks about when you go out on the road? Other than
I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say, other than obviously what we've talked about, but how do you encompass all of that? And
so initially it started out to where we just tell our story, just like we're telling you about what we went through. The big three: the attempted suicide, line of duty death, and the officer involved shooting. And then what we did in the road to recovery, and, offered, academic resources and national resources to provide help. And as I'm further along in my degree, because I'm working on my master's degree right now, we talk about a variety of different mental health issues. And we talk about peer support because, first and foremost, that's best practices to help first responders. Mm-hmm. So our topics are branching out a lot more than they used to be. I presented at the Wounded Blue conference and I talked about peer support, and we're talking at the Fraternal Order of Police Wellness Conference, and basically whatever topic they want us to talk about that is in our wheelhouse.
Sure.
That's what we talk about.
Sure.
Right. And the funny thing about it is all the topics that we talk about, they all come back to a form of mental health and wellness. Mm-hmm. No matter what we talk about, that is always going to be a component that we insert in everything.
Right.
We went to Washington, D.C. For a government agency, and they needed to have a class about officer-involved shootings and how they should handle it. We still talked about the mental health and wellness component of it, because as we talked about it, and as you know, Ken, that you can have all the policies in place and the tactics and everything of being involved in the shooting. If that department isn't ready for the mental aftermath, they're going to lose an officer,
right? And
they're going to lose that officer's family, and anybody residual that was affected by that incident, they're going to possibly lose. Yeah. So everything that we talk about is going to have a mental health and wellness component.
Right. And you said they're going to lose that officer, they're going to lose the family, but there's going to be so much more. Yes, they're going to lose that for the worker and stuff. But there's another side of it where that officer is now going to have to live with that for the rest of their life. And if it hasn't been adjusted and dealt with correctly, that officer can very well now become an issue for, whether criminally or mental health wise, or, you name it. There could be, just because that person has not been able to adjust and been able to deal with their issue. And
so
Yeah.
You're right. But I was going to say, let's go back to the documentary Officer Involved.
Uh-huh.
Some of the officers that Patrick interviews are no longer, or were no longer in law enforcement at the time of the documentary when he was doing it, and probably still aren't. You know, that's why that documentary is so important, because it isn't just interviewing a whole bunch of active duty cops that went through something. He interviews people that, because of what happened to them, because they were the officer involved, they're no longer doing the job. And we always feel that if more people saw that, which they see the humanity, they would understand what we do much more.
Right. Right. And I think how do you work with that? How do you support those folks? How do you get that education out to people as far as you guys are concerned? How would you go about doing that? If you were to...
We speak at a lot of conferences, and we try to get into as many police departments as we can. The thing that we've run up against lately is that the trendy topic amongst law enforcement administrators is police reform.
Right.
And that's rightfully so. But no amount of police reform is going to work if they have mentally unwell officers or physically unwell officers. Mental health and wellness should be the top of the list in police reform. Because what is it they always say? Hurt people hurt people.
Right. Yeah.
And if you have thousands of walking wounded, working the streets every day in your city, and you're not taking care of their physical and mental wellness, there's a problem.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. You think about that, when if you become a lifeguard or something like that, and you tell the person, calm down or relax, I'm here to help. You let them know ahead of time, as opposed to just swimming out there to somebody that's drowning and letting them freak out. When they freak out and just lose it, they're going to now take you with them. It's that, right, like you said, the wounded, or the hurting others.
We try to do it through education. I guess that's what I was trying to say, is just through education. We do podcasts and webinars, and we just try and educate people on what can happen and what will happen if you don't take care of your people. Right.
And what are some of the best ways that you tell people to take care of each other?
Peer support.
Peer support
is number one.
Yes. And through the peer support, what we're saying is take care of yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost. If Kathy hadn't done the steps to take care of herself personally, and if I hadn't done the steps to take care of myself personally also, we would never have been able to take care of ourselves as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
It's not selfish to focus on yourself.
Right.
That's the number one thing. You got to take care of yourself, because if you're broken, you're not going to be able to be any kind of worth to anybody else.
True.
And triage. The number one thing we want somebody to do is to triage their own life. Look at your personal life, look at your professional life, look at your significant other, your spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it is. Look at your children. How healthy are the people around you? In that, it's basically like triaging your physical. If you're bleeding, you're going to put a Band-Aid on it. All these things you're triaging. What does your life look like? Are you happy, healthy? Are your children happy and healthy? Is your spouse's significant others happy and healthy? That's the first thing, because if you're not honest with yourself, it's never going to do anybody any good.
Right.
Just like Javier said, I had to recognize my problems. He had to recognize his problems. I had to lose the arrogance that I felt and say, no, this is not just Javier's problem. This is my problem as well. And Javier had to do the same. And I think that's what we ask everybody to do, is just triage your life. How healthy are you, and how healthy is your family?
Sure.
And then what steps do I need to take to get to where I want to be?
So if you were to define, and it's kind of a word that people are starting to understand and know more of, but if you were to define peer or peer support, what would that be? So just for the layman to be like, oh, I get what you're saying. I understand.
Being in the hole with your brother or sister.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily just mean police officer. That could be, firefighter or plumber, like I said before, or, somebody that has an understanding of where you're at.
Right.
Correct? Right.
They might not have necessarily, the best peer support is having If Javier's been involved in a shooting, having somebody peer him that has been involved in a shooting also. But it doesn't always have to be that way. We peer lots of officers who are involved in lots of critical incidents, and it doesn't always have to be that way. But just holding space for somebody is mainly what peer support is. Just holding space for somebody and giving them a safe place to fall or a safe place to talk.
Right. I think of it as like a tugboat. When a big ship's coming into port, that tugboat comes alongside and just guides. That just helps. They're not going to take the load. They're not going to pull. They're not going to do all the work, but they're there to help you know where your lane's at and help you know guide you to where you're supposed to go tie up, And so I think that's something similar to what, as far as the human factor of what a peer support would be. Am I close on that?
Oh yeah. And we have to, we are very much a rough culture. Like we are tough on each other. We eat our own, basically, is what I like to say. And so being a peer support person is, and I hate to use, hippie words, but it's a kinder, gentler title, basically. Yeah. Of being a friend and a fellow coworker, and being a friend and just being gentler to that person who may or may not be struggling.
Right. Yeah, you need a battle buddy.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Battle buddy, somebody that that they're going to have your back when you're struggling. Right. So that's cool.
I go back and forth between my cop words and my counseling words, and hopefully they're all the same one day.
Yeah, that's funny. So how do people know where to be able to find this if they're struggling and they don't necessarily have it? Let's take police officers or whatever. They don't have it in their department, or anything else. Where do people go, and how do they get through something, that they're struggling with, and they feel alone, they feel worthless, or they feel to that point where they don't feel anybody's around them?
Well, we are available much of the time for a resource for peer support. We get calls regularly from across the nation for officers who just need to talk to somebody. And, they may have found our card somewhere or may have seen our Facebook page or our website. And another thing is Copline. 1-800-COP-LINE is 24/7 call. It's a crisis call center, and it's manned by retired law enforcement officers who've been heavily vetted and trained. And they're available nights, weekends, holidays, and it's all retired police officers. Wow. It's also anonymous and confidential. So if you want to call and say, my name is Daffy Duck and this is what I'm going through, you can do that. But it's an excellent, excellent resource. Right.
And so, one thing that I kind of missed that I wanted to kind of cover was what are the legalities of a peer support person. So, and that's something that some people just forget about, or they don't think about, because if you get into a shooting, there's an investigation going on. It, like you said, going to the grand jury, and it could easily go to court, and people get subpoenaed all the time, and they get called in. And what is the legality in regards to a peer support?
It depends on where you're at. In the state of Texas, we have a confidentiality law in our health and safety code. So our trained peer supporters are covered by state law as far as confidential information. So we cannot be, I think in worse situations, we could be subpoenaed, but they don't do it because we're covered by the health and safety code. Right. They just signed the Law Enforcement Confidentiality Act for federal agents, federal employees. So different states are working on different things and have different levels of confidentiality. But overwhelmingly, states are working on getting that for peer support. You don't have the same level of confidentiality as a psychologist. If you're a harm to yourself or others, child abuse or felonious acts, then you have to disclose it. But right. A lot of states are working on confidentiality for peer support because they recognize how valuable it is.
Right, and we have a similar law here where if I go home and I unload to my wife about whatever issue, she can't get subpoenaed in. She has a protected area, because you should have the privacy of your own home. Your clergy has the same thing, a chaplain or whatever, but then our peers as well. Lawyers, obviously your lawyer has it, but a peer does as well. There's that protected person who can sit there. And, honestly, our chaplains with our department are peer counselors as well. And so they have that same thing, and they're there with when we have debriefs after major incidents. And that makes a huge difference to know that you can do that with them if you feel comfortable, or you can do it with another person who's an officer who is in fact also a peer counselor or a peer.
Oh yeah, I agree. I always call it the Trinity. A good peer support program is going to have the Trinity. They're going to have your peers who are the first responders. You're going to have your psychologist, and you're going to have your clergy, your chaplain. Those three components, that trilogy, that Trinity, is going to be valuable to help their people. So yes, it's very important, because you get all the aspects. You get the spiritual and you get the mental out of it, and you get the peer. Right.
Go ahead, Kathy.
And the opposite, the flip side of that is, if there are a lot of cops out there that just wouldn't trust anybody, even a fellow peer or somebody that's trained or somebody that promises confidentiality. And that's the beauty of Copline, is that you don't have to give your name, and you can say whatever you want to say. There's no recording. There's no trail of reports or anything like that.
Right.
So if there's somebody out there that's truly worried about their level of confidentiality, Copline is the way to go.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to give anybody your name.
Because sometimes you just got to get it off your chest.
Right. Right. And they take calls ranging from, I got in a fight with my girlfriend tonight, and I'm feeling sad, to I have a gun in my mouth and I'm about to pull the trigger.
Right.
And everything in between. It's not just crisis. Sometimes cops, especially retired ones, just need to talk about their careers. And so that's the beauty of Copline, is that if you have an officer out there that's just not trusting of anybody, they can call that number.
And that's something that we're recognizing too, because Kathy's been retired now for a couple of years, and I'm getting closer to retirement. And what we're seeing is there's so many retired officers that, because the stigma, the culture, didn't never ever think about getting help. Now they're beginning to do that.
Right.
So we have,
or they're not,
yeah. True. But those that are willing to and are ready to, they now know that even though that they're retired, that they can still reach out. And as I get closer to retirement, that's something that I really want to focus on, is our retired first responder community that never ever got the chance to get that help when they were active duty.
Right.
And the suicide rate is fairly high from retired officers.
Is it really, compared to the active?
Compared to active duty, yes, it's increasing, because when you think about it, when you retire, I don't have to go to work. I don't have to get up in the morning. I get to grow a beard. Well, although now beards in law enforcement are trendy. But, I get to do all these things and have all this freedom, but you also lose your schedule. You lose the camaraderie that you have. You lose your brothers and sisters. And so it's becoming very problematic for retired officers, and the suicide rate is going up. Right.
Because like Kathy said, they lose all that. But what they don't lose is their memories.
And your identity. You lose your identity of being a police officer.
Yeah.
And, your department may or may not, they may recognize you, or they may not, they may forget the minute you walk out the door, but it's a big life. It has a big life impact.
Yeah, my last episode, I was speaking with Bob Bemis. I don't know if you guys.
Oh yeah,
you guys know Bob, and
yes.
We were talking about that same thing, that once you're done, you retire or whatever. Officers lose their mission. They lose their and you said they lose their identity. And we were talking about that whole thing, that if you have another mission to go for, and if you do that, then you have an opportunity to actually do something and continue understanding who it is you are, because we align ourselves with what we do is who we are.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately we do that. And people say, oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't, your job is a job and you should be you know what, that is, because that's not necessarily true. Because you go to a party or something like that, people say, hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm a police officer. Oh, you are. And all of a sudden they're now looking at you this, whatever way. And,
right.
And you're like, okay, yeah, or, and we get those questions, we get that stuff, but you say like a plumber who, well, I'm a plumber. Oh, well, I've got this thing under my sink and blah, blah, blah. And, all of a sudden, but that's who they are. Cause then they'll say, I met that guy the other night at your party and he was a plumber and he's, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. People identify us as that, but we also identify ourselves because you guys said it yourself. When you were starting out, you poured everything into it. Mm-hmm. You eat, drank, slept police work. And mm-hmm. so that's it's part of your identity, whether you want it to be or not. There's a stamp, there's a tattoo of a badge somewhere, and I think we don't remember that you have to, there's a point where it has to stop because you can't run at this, in fifth gear all the time. You have to get to the point where you mellow out or you stop. And so you do something else. And then the people that retire after 25 years or the people that retire after 5 years, they quit work because they say, this maybe is not for me. Mm-hmm. They've got to find something to do. You've got to find some mission, something that makes you who you are. And I think you guys are right on when you're saying our job right now is to help other people. Your job right now, you got to be a police officer still.
Yeah.
But your ultimate goal that you guys are going towards is that whole making sure people are doing well. And that's your mm-hmm. mission. And that's cool because you could still be in the police world, but mm-hmm. you're not running and gunning, like you said.
Right. And that's ultimately, I think the way we like to say it is don't retire from something, retire to something.
There you go.
And I was able to healthily retire because I was retiring to complete my degree to become a counselor to treat police officers and first responders. So it has not been a hard transition for me because I've stayed busy working on my degree for this entire time.
Right.
And I'm also immersed in it, every day through him. And a couple of times have still been rough for me in that I'm like, I should be out there with my brothers and sisters, but in reality, I wouldn't have been anyway.
Right.
So I retired as a lieutenant and I would have been in a dumb meeting somewhere.
Sure. Yeah. Radio turned off. Yeah.
On and the things like that, I would have been in some stupid meeting. So, but in my mind, I would be out there with them. So that, departments need to think about their retired folks also.
Right. How do you guys tell someone when they deal with, betrayal or whatever, they think that, that they are, they're no longer there. How do you guys support somebody in that position that they feel they either been betrayed by their department or by, whatever the case is?
The thing that I try to do is just reframe their thought process because, like I talked about myself, I stayed angry at my organization for years because of perceived injustices and things that I thought they should have done better.
Right.
When it was not my agency's responsibility, it was my responsibility to take care of myself, but I was focusing solely on them. I was angry, but what I was doing was I was grieving a loss, several losses that I never got help for. And, I try to reframe it to where they're focusing on themselves and their own wellness. And if you're well, all these other things that are happening are not going to be as detrimental to you.
Right.
They're not going to matter as much if you're taking care of yourself the way you should be taking care of yourself. And that's what, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And, sometimes people just have to see for themselves like we did. But, if you focus on yourself and your own wellness and your family's wellness, all these other things are going to be minor.
Yeah. Put your oxygen mask on first and then you can help.
Yes, definitely.
That's it. So, well, that's, I honestly think you guys are doing the Lord's work here. This is good stuff that you guys do. And, I'm very honored that you were able to come on today. And, if I'm going to not necessarily pay some bills because I don't necessarily have any bills to pay on this. However, I do want to let everybody know that if you want to get a hold of the What's Your podcast, or you have questions for me or for any of my guests, including Kathy and Javi here, you can get a hold of me on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn, and you can also, if you're interested in this and what's going on here, go back to our previous episodes. You can find that at our website, which is the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. And we have all of our prior episodes plus links that go into every podcast platform that you might listen to it on. You can go in there, you can subscribe. When you subscribe, that is a good thing. And then when you download, that's even a better thing, because then that gives me numbers as to who's listening, what you guys want to hear. And I can get more people like Kathy and Javi to come on, and I can even have them come back on later on if you guys say, hey, I've got a ton of questions for these guys, and cool, let's do a Q&A or whatever. But get a hold of us and join that conversation. Kathy and Javi, do you guys have anything you want to add before we press the stop button on this?
You want to go first?
Just everything I've said. Just please take care of yourself first, and before you worry about everything else. And I don't say this bitterly. I know it could come across like that, but I gave 25 years of my life to law enforcement, and I gave everything I had, as I stated earlier, and I was able to walk away healthy. And that's my wish for everybody, is that you give what you can to your career and you do the best job possible, but ultimately take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because the department is not going to miss a beat when you walk out the door. We like to think, oh, they're going to be so much worse without me. What are they going to do without me? But they move on without missing a beat.
Right.
And what's important is that you take care of yourself.
I want to piggyback on what Kathy said. Is ultimately this is a calling, but it is a job. What's not a job is your life. Mm-hmm. And you have to take care of yourself when you're active duty or you're retired. Think about your life and think about what you can do for yourself first to make yourself a better person. And then go from there and be that better person for yourself first, and then for your families. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's where it's at, because when the job's over, there's somebody else that's going to fill your spot. But you will see that your family will never be able to fill your spot if you're gone. So take care of yourselves. That's the biggest thing I have to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hashtag just one contact.
Hashtag just one contact. That's we always say that. We always feel that if you're thinking about somebody and they're on your mind, check on them. Hashtag just one contact, and let them know, hey, I want to check on you and see how you're doing. You're on my mind. Everything okay? That might be a very critical moment that person needed to hear from somebody.
Yeah. That's cool. And they can get a hold of you guys, or they can find you guys at kathyandjavi.com, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
And we're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram.
Yeah, a YouTube channel. Yeah, YouTube.
All the things except for TikTok, and we refuse.
Yeah, I am not going to do a TikTok video. I am not going to be dancing.
That's probably best. I've heard rumors. No, I've not heard anything, but I'm not going to do one either. I'm not going to let China get my info. So they probably already have it, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. No, thank you guys so much for coming on today. It's been great. And just the idea that you guys are willing to serve, to have served, and then continue to want to serve. That's what really makes a hero. And that's what this podcast is about, to showcase that. And some people think oh, I'm not a hero. I just do what I'm supposed to, or I do. And you are, because you are doing that, and you put yourself into that, and it makes a big difference. And I thank you for it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for what you do as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the service you do. And thank you for the service you're doing with these podcasts, helping other people. Maybe I am Batman after all. I don't know.
You might be. Yeah. Well, I don't want to see in tights, but we'll see.
No, I don't want to see myself in tights.
That's probably best. So, I do want to thank all of our first responders out there, firefighters and teachers and nurses, and all you guys EMTs, you guys that do stuff out there every day that make sure that we can be healthy and happy. And our veterans, thank you so much for keeping us safe, because without you, we definitely wouldn't have the country we have, and just your mindset to be willing to stand up for what's right. And ultimately, I really want to thank our police officers, you guys out there that do the job, that make sure we can sleep in our beds at night, knowing that, I don't have to worry about things. And if you are a phone call away, if not, if you're not just going through my neighborhood, doing on regular patrol, but there's not enough thanks in the world. And if you need help, reach out to somebody. If you're struggling, if you're thinking of, or suicide, or you're thinking of divorcing your wife because she just doesn't understand where you're at with work, or you're that grumpy guy or girl in your department, reach out, because nobody's going to dog you for being hurt. It's not what we do. And if they're doing that, they're obviously not the person you need to be reaching out for. So for Kathy and Javi Bustos, I thank you so much. You get a chance, look up Officer Involved by Patrick Shaver, and you'll it's a good documentary. It's very helpful. Look it up, and without them doing that stuff, we wouldn't have a lot of things that we do have. So I appreciate it. So for Kathy and Javi, I've been Ken Frownfelter. This has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.